Right, let's get into some news around the world. A few pieces I've picked up. There's a lot going on in American politics, which I'm going to try and avoid this week because it's getting a bit stupid. There's far more prevalent things to be dealing with than knowing who's corrupt and who's not, when the reality is most of them are, if not all. And talking about criminality and politicians, a member of the House of Lords in the UK has been charged with 2 counts of attempted rape. Former Labour peer Lord Nazir Hamid of Rotherham is also charged with 1 count of indecent assault. 2 other men, Mohammed Farouk and Mohammed Tariq, both from Rotherham, have also been charged, and all 3 men are due to appear in court on March the 19th. Mr. Farouk is charged with 4 counts of indecent assault also, and Mr. Tariq is charged with 2 counts of indecent assault. So the House of Lords is like the chamber in America. Loads of people who sit there or occasionally turn up, all have titles and generally do nothing apart from end up in the Hellfire Caves. For those of you familiar with that, a bit like Bohemian Grove in the UK. A question that lies before those who homeschool their children has now come under scrutiny, with another German-sounding name and another bill. This time a bill in Iowa's HF 272 established a fundamental right of the state in the lives of children over those of their parents, really. And Iowa House Democrats' assault on homeschooling families in 2019 continues in the form of yet another bill sponsored by State Representative Mary Masher. And unlike HF 182, another bill Masher filed this session related to homeschooling that eliminates independent private instruction. HF 272 keeps the phrase independent private instruction in the Iowa Code, but requires families selecting that option to submit the same form that was required under competent private instruction. Families who are providing independent private instruction for the first time would also be required to submit proof of their child's required immunisations. See how they roll it in. It's a bill for one, but really it's the sleight of hand, and let's throw some other things in. But that's not the most worst aspect of the bill. Similar to a bill suggested earlier this year by State Representative Art Stade of Democrats of Cedar Rapids, HF 272 requires health and wellness checks of families who engage in independent private instruction or private instruction. And the bill reads, the Board of Directors of a school district shall conduct quarterly home visits to check on the health and safety of children located within the district who are receiving independent private instruction or private instruction. And the bill also states that these home visits shall take place in the child's residence with the consent of the parent, guardian or legal custodian, and also an interview or observation of the child may also be conducted. All very Nazi to me. Papers, please. If parents do not provide consent, then the school district, the juvenile court, or the district court, upon a showing of probable cause, may authorise the person making the home visit to enter the home and interview or observe the child. So in other words, anyone doing homeschooling now has to have injections and agree to their home being invaded 4 times a year. This, what's her name again? Mary Masher. I pulled up her records this week, and she's must have put in at least 23 bills this year alone. And I found some others. Each school board shall provide an age-appropriate and research-based instruction in human growth and development, including instruction regarding human sexuality, self-esteem, stress management, interpersonal relationships and consent, domestic abuse, HPV and the availability of a vaccine to prevent HPV, and acquired immune deficiency syndrome as required in section 25611, grades 1 through 12. And so basically she wants sex education discussed on what is consent with sex education to children. And she even put in consent means affirmative, conscious or voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity. In other words, she wants to find out what the kids are up to. It's none of their business, but you know how they get involved. And it says a responsibility of each person involved in sexual activity to ensure that the others consent to engage in sexual activity. And then she puts in another bill, which is very similar but a slight change. Each school board shall provide age-appropriate and research-based instruction in human growth and development. Again, including human sexuality, self-esteem, stress management for children. Organ and tissue donation was added in for children at school. Interpersonal relationships, domestic abuse, HPV, and the availability of a vaccine to prevent it. And this is going into schools, grades 1 through 12. According to Miss Masher. She also added another bill in. A candidate or candidates committee may use campaign funds to pay for expenses related to the care of any dependent of the candidate. Don't they get paid enough? Don't they get enough perks without... everyone else who goes to work has to pay for their own childcare. Why should they be any different? But these are atypical of current modern day politicians. Line the back pockets and turn the people into spy zones, interfering in kids' lives, interfering in parents' lives. None of which is helpful. The ones children that are requiring help, they ignore, as we've seen all too often. 2 Californian journalists, that's an oxymoron, requested and were given data on police arrests and convictions over the past 10 years. Nice in a minute. Data protection, all except the people. And what they found was surprising: domestic abuse, child molestation, and even murder. And they were given these documents through a public record request, something journalists exercise frequently. But the California Attorney General, Xavier Becerra, says it was a mistake and they should never have received it in the first place. Now, Becerra, whose office was responsible for maintaining the information, said the centre had distributed it, but it was not authorised to do so. And he wants the investigative reporting programme at the University of California at Berkeley and its 2 journalists to destroy the files and refrain from publishing them. Not doing so, Becerra claimed, would be against the law, but the Berkeley journalist says they are on solid legal footing and are standing their ground. So they were given data on police officers' arrest and also police officers' convictions, which involved domestic abuse, child molestation and murder. And they want to cover it up. shocking data that came out, government data, this week, that shows that of the missing children reported to be sex trafficked in 2017, 88% of them had come from the American foster care system. 88% of sex trafficking was in the foster care system. America has a dark secret that no one wants to admit, and talk of this secret will get you labelled as a conspiracy theorist, as we all know. Fake news and outlets report it will have their organic reach throttled by social media and also Google alike. Now, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary, many in the mainstream media and the government refuse to see this very real epidemic of child sex trafficking in the United States. 800 to 900,000 go missing permanently each year. That's outside of the ones that are sex trafficked. And children are being needlessly ripped from homes at such an alarming rate that hundreds of parents in one state have gone so far as to create a counter-kidnapping organisation to stop it. This involves all the remember the piece I did when I spoke about the 7 bodies or organisations of society? They're all involved in it. Hospitals, social services, child protection, police, judges, politicians, all the ones that are supposed to look after the people are all involved in this. It's one giant cover-up. And it's not just in America either. It's in every country. A parents' rights organisation filed a letter in federal court last Tuesday asking a federal judge strike down Minnesota's current child protection laws for being too expansive and removing children from loving and safe homes without due process. This was going on in the UK in the 1990s. Families are being abused and in some cases destroyed as a result of laws that are inappropriate, said Dwight Mitchell, the lead plaintiff in the case and founder of the Parents Association. He stated this is legal kidnapping. This legal kidnapping is happening in states across the country and it's contributing to a very real epidemic of child trafficking. The reality of such practices within the United States foster system is outright horrifying. Now, other governmental organisations have corroborated this trend, and in 2013 the FBI did a 70-city nationwide raid. 60% of the victims came from foster care or group homes. In 2014, the New York authorities estimated that 85% of sex trafficking victims were previously in the child welfare system. Connecticut, 2012, police rescued 88 children from sex trafficking. 86 of them were from child welfare system. Equally as disturbing is the fact that most sex trafficked kids come from within the system is a fact that the FBI discovered in a 2014 nationwide raid. Children as young as 11 were never reported missing by child welfare authorities. And last year, there was a report on an example of this lack of reporting out of Topeka, Kansas. In the report, the Kansas Department for Children and Families, which oversees foster care in the state, were found to have lost 70 children after a high-profile case of 3 missing sisters garnered the attention of the authorities. This is what's going on. And this is, to me, is far more of an item that needs highlighting and focusing than what Comey or Clinton or the others are doing. Even though some of them are involved in this nonsense. We all know that. But it's funny how we've covered word magic and the etymology of certain words. And foster is no different. The term foster means to feed. Comes from fostrian, which means feed, nourish, or support, or foster food. For those of you who remember why we're building the wall, you'll put two and two together, because this is what's going on. Beyond disgusting. The United States has officially shuttered its consulate in Jerusalem this week, downgrading the status of its main diplomatic mission to the Palestinians by folding it into the US Embassy to Israel. For decades, the consulate functioned as a de facto embassy to the Palestinians, and now that outreach will be handled by a Palestinian Affairs unit under the command of the embassy. Now, the symbolic shift hands authority over US diplomatic channels with the West Bank and Gaza to Ambassador David Friedman, a long-time supporter and fundraiser for the West Bank settler movement and a fierce critic of the Palestinian leadership. I'm biting my tongue. I'm really biting my tongue at this point. The announcement from the State Department came early Monday in Jerusalem, and the merger effective that day. This decision was driven by our global efforts to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our diplomatic engagements and operations, state spokesman Robert Palladino said in a statement. It does not signal a change of US policy on Jerusalem, the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. Well, if it was efficiency and effectiveness, given the mass disparity in wealth of the two countries, wouldn't it have been diplomatic and effective if the Israeli one was rolled into the Palestinian embassy, which is where it should be? Does not signal a change. No, it won't, because the same Israeli policymakers make sure it doesn't change, using blackmail and coercion. Ain't that right, Mr. Trump? An investment bank led by an oligarch who collaborated with Prince Charles on charity work managed a network of offshore companies that was moving billions out of Russia. Go figure. An international investigation this week has now exposed how the network received money from companies linked to major fraud. The oligarch Ruben Vardanyan, who is the former boss of Moscow investment bank Troika Dialog, says he was not involved in the bank's day-to-day operations. Money from the network was sent to the Prince's Charities Foundation to help restore Dumfries House, which is a stately home in Ayrshire, Scotland. And the Prince's Charities said they had subjected Mr. Vardanyan's donations to robust due diligence and no red flags had been raised. Yeah, a bit like all the donations into the Clinton Foundation. But between 2009 and 2011, the Prince's Charities received 3 payments adding up to $202,000 via a now defunct bank in Lithuania. And the leaked bank data shows the last of the payments went to an account held by the Prince's Charities Foundation. Payments were from a company called Qantas Division Limited, which is revealed today to be part of a network of offshore companies that sent billions of dollars out of Russia. A bit like Leo Wunter and his Langley buddies. This is a story from my hometown, And most people, well, in fact, all people from Liverpool will remember the day back in 1993, and it actually happened no more than a couple of 100 yards from where I was living at the time. We all saw the police tape and wondered what had happened. And what had taken place is a 3-year-old child was taken by 2 young boys, aged 10, and brutally assaulted and killed. And the 2 kids, who were 10 at the time, the city turned into vigilantes and wanted to push the van over when they were going to court. I can understand the anger, but it doesn't help. And eventually those 2 got out. I don't think they were kept in for more than 7 years. I think it was less in one case. The father this week lost a legal challenge to try and change a lifelong anonymity order for one of his son's killers. And Mr. Ralph Bulger wanted information on John Venables in particular, and his new identity to be made public. Now, Venables, who was then let out, was then put back in for possessing child abuse images. And Venables and Robin Thompson, both 10, killed the 2-year-old back in 1993, and Bulger's lawyers argued that information about Venables, which was common knowledge, should be made public. However, the president of Family Divisions refused to change the terms of the order, which was designed to protect the uniquely notorious Venables from being put to death. And he went on to say there's a strong possibility, if not probability, that if his identity were known, he would be pursued, resulting in grave and possibly fatal consequences. So that child was 2. It kind of rocked the city for a long time. That 2 10-year-old kids. I won't give you the details of what they did. I read the whole document when I was working on social services cases. It really beggars belief that one child would do that, never mind 2. But they served their time. Whether it was long enough is for the authorities to state, not us. But if they served their time and are behaving themselves, then they don't need vigilantes from 26 years ago chasing after them. Like I said, we can all debate whether they should have been let out. Given what they did, perhaps they shouldn't. But perhaps if the mother wasn't shoplifting at the time and was looking after the child wouldn't have gone missing. So there's a lot of mistakes surrounding that case. A lot of people, those 2 kids dragging that 2-year-old for near 3 miles, and no one stopped them. The kid was screaming. But I don't think vigilantes 26 years on, maybe I'd be different if it was my child, I don't know. I just don't think it helps. Won't bring the child back, will it? OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma LP is exploring filing for bankruptcy this week to address potentially significant liabilities from roughly 2,000 lawsuits alleging the drug maker contributed to the deadly opioid crisis which is sweeping across the United States. People familiar with the matter have said the potential move shows how Purdue and its wealthy owners the Sackler family. Did you know, if you remember a recent show, that you'll be unsurprised to know that the Sackler family were born in New York to a Jewish family? Seeing the picture here? And they are under pressure to respond to mounting litigation accusing the drug maker of misleading doctors and patients about risks associated with the prolonged use of its prescription opioids. Purdue predictably denies the allegations, arguing that the US FDA approved labels for its opioids. Well, it was, but they're just as corrupt. You know, these are the same people that promoted, at the request of Donald Rumsfeld, aspartame. And carried warnings about the risk of abuse and misuse associated with the pain treatments, and filing for Chapter 11 protection would halt the lawsuits and allow Purdue to negotiate legal claims with plaintiffs under the supervision of a US bankruptcy judge. It's a bit like Monsanto. Watch Purdue get swallowed by another company. That's how they do it. And shares of Endo International PLC and Insist Therapeutics Inc., which are two companies that, like Purdue, have been named in lawsuits related to the opioid crisis, closed down 17% on Monday. Final news item before we go into some Q&A. Musician R. Kelly was taken into custody Wednesday after failing to comply with a judge's order that he pay more than $161,000 in back child support. More than an hour after Kelly entered a closed court hearing in the Daly Center, he walked out accompanied by Cook County Sheriff's deputies, who then put him in custody. And the hearing was held by Judge Laurie Rosen, who last month warned Kelly that he faced jail time unless he paid the child support and also the interest. Now, during Wednesday's hearing, Kelly was found in contempt and ordered into custody, according to Kara Smith, the chief policy officer at the sheriff's office, and he must pay $161,663 to be released from jail, she said. Now, his next court date is March 13th, and the arrest comes less than 2 weeks. Do you hear that, Dave? 2 weeks. After Kelly put up $100,000 to be released from custody on criminal sexual abuse charges. That man should be locked up. I had the misfortune of having to tidy up a house that R. Kelly had rented in Florida. I've never seen anything so disgusting in all my life. In fact, if I was the owner of the house, I would never step foot in that house again. I'd have made him buy the whole house. And he was with 13 and 14-year-old girls. We all knew. And yes, like others, he continues to walk around free.